Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Rotary Club of New York UN breakfast meeting for today, which is Wednesday, November the 17th, 2021. And unfortunately, due to COVID, we're not actually having breakfast together this morning. We're doing it remotely, but that has given us the opportunity to include people we normally would not be able to have at our breakfast meetings. Today, we have some really quite interesting guests, both long Rotarians. And I'm going to hand over the meeting to our chair of the UN International Breakfast Committee, Malika Abreu, for the honor of introducing our guests. Good morning, Malika.
Good morning, everybody. And we are very honored today to have a special guest in the person of Mr. Miller from Colorado, who is joining us and teaming with Tom, who is going to speak to us about their experience, about the Peace Corps volunteers, their experience as returned Peace Corps volunteers, as they call them, and the organization of the Peace Corps, and also this new memorandum of understanding between Rotary and the Peace Corps volunteers. So, as you all know, the Peace Corps was created in 1960 by John F. Kennedy on the steps of the Ann Arbor University. He wanted the Peace Corps to be an organization that brings understanding to developing countries and to counterbalance the influence of communism in many countries. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Tom, who is, now let me see my notes. Tom is, he has assisted in conducting the Rotary Club of New York's monthly International Breakfast meeting, and was the editor and contributor to the blog Inside the United Nations, a look at the permanent missions, UN administration, and NGO organizations accredited to the United Nations. Tom lives in Long Island with his wife, Noemi, whom he met while serving in the Peace Corps, and was lucky enough to convince her to move to the United States with him. They have 5 children and 8 grandchildren. Mr. Miller was a Peace Corps volunteer in Fiji Island from 1968 to 1970. He assisted in establishing the official partnership with the Peace Corps. As a Denver Rotarian, Charlie serves on the board of trustees, board of directors, and he rose up to the club's first vice president. Shortly after completing his Peace Corps service in Fiji, Charlie graduated from Harvard University Law School and has had 40 extensive legal career in Colorado. He has donated his talents to many notable nonprofit organizations in the Rocky Mountains. He has 2 sons and 5 grandchildren. I give the floor to Tom to introduce his experience with the Peace Corps.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Malika, and thank you so much for asking me to participate in this. This is something I know about, the Rotary Peace Corps partnership. This is something I really know the best in the room, except next to Charlie. My Peace Corps story, but before I wanted to introduce that, the Peace Corps right now has been disbanded since the COVID, since March of 2020. They had 7,500 Peace Corps volunteers in service, but they were all sent home. and hopefully it'll be back starting next year. So my story with the Peace Corps is about 2 years after college, I had a very good job down on Wall Street, great company. I was getting promoted. I was maybe 24 years old. And I said, you know, this corporate world is just not for me. Let me think about the Peace Corps. And I put the application in. It took 6 months to get through it. You have to go through medical, police records, transcripts, letters of recommendation, and you go through it. And once you get through that, then you go through a 1-week interview. They send you down to a small hotel in rural West Virginia. And the 50 of us who were going to the West Indies were all being monitored from 7 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. They wanted to see if we're grumpy, if we're introverted, if we have intolerance, prejudice, and things. And so you're monitored for 1 week to see if you qualify what they think would be a Peace Corps, because they're always afraid of people joining and then they quit after the first month. So I was accepted, and I was very happy to do it. I didn't tell anybody about it. I called my father, and I'm ready to leave in 2 weeks. I quit my job already. I gave up my apartment, and I called him up, and I said, I'm joining the Peace Corps. And my father, being from the Depression era, thought, you're quitting a good job joining the Peace Corps? I couldn't believe it. He asked me if I fell and banged my head or something. And I said, no, I'm okay. And he wanted to talk to me, and he came over to my apartment, and he said, you can't do this. I said, Dad, it's too late. I have the tickets and everything's gone. So he was annoyed, but we reconciled. So then we go down to the West Indies for training, 6 weeks training. So this is where you first find out where like Peace Corps and Rotary are similar, because during the training session, they would put us into a homestay. And instead of putting us in a hotel during the training, you stay with a family. And you would eat dinner with the family. You would go to church with the family if you wanted to. You would go to their parties, and you really became part of the family there. And this is the same thing that Rotary does in its group study exchange. When you go to a group study exchange, you live with Rotarians. Our club used to have, when Police Commissioner Kelly was commissioner, he came to our club often, and he was a recipient of the group fellow exchange in Japan. And he was a young sergeant at the time, and he spent 6 weeks in Japan. And he always loved coming to our club because he said he got his international experience and perspective from that Rotary mission. And he always appreciated Rotaries from that. And so that's why the Peace Corps does the same thing, where you stay at a homestay, and they're really copying the Rotary model. And they've been doing this all the time. They knew how important it is to stay with the family, to actually live with the family for 6 weeks. And that's part of the training. And during the day, we would get training by professors, would come in from the University of West Indies, we'll get all the economics, the history, the indigenous people's history, fishing techniques, about the beaches, tours of the island, and really got a great graduate seminar, 6-week seminar of the West Indies. So after the completion of 6 weeks, I was going to be a teacher at the technical college. So technical college is a little different in St. Vincent. The children graduate at 15 years old from high school. So they're in college by 16. And so I was going to be teaching the refrigeration program at the technical college. So I go to meet the dean of the school, a very nice man, Mr. Horace Lewis, great man. And he's showing me around the campus. He shows me the electronics shop. He shows me the machine shop. There's a secretarial section, an English section, auto repair section. I'm thinking, well, where's the refrigeration section? And he shows me this room, about 400 square feet, and it's empty, except for an old blackboard and an old refrigeration compressor sitting there. I said, oh, I said, maybe my father was right, that maybe it wasn't such a good idea. But then Mr. Lewis told me, he says, don't worry, the Rotary Club is sending down a container load of cargo. But really? Yeah. And he says, it's going to have books, it's going to have desks and everything. And it should be here in a couple of weeks. I said, oh, okay. And it's by Rotary, and it's coming from Rotarians from Toronto, Canada, are the ones paying for it. I said, oh, okay. So I never really knew anything about Rotary. I've heard of it, never knew anything about it. But I knew I'd been to a few Lions picnics over the years, or Knights of Columbus. So, okay, so I have 2 or 3 weeks to get my house, find a house, and I'm painting up the shop, cleaning it up, getting things ready. And then a Rotarian comes in, he says, wants to meet me, the president of the local Rotary Club, the Concentric Rotary Club, says, oh, I'd like to, I heard you were here, and I'm gonna tell you, the container's coming tomorrow. And I said, great, you know. So they bring this huge, full-size container, just like you see on all the cargo ships. And I said, wow, that's something. And also 6 of the other Rotarians come, and then we're gonna unload it the next day. And so here's this big container at the college. And they opened the doors, and I couldn't believe it. It was full of tools, books, meters, desks, blackboards, notebooks, you name it. It had everything in there. It was unbelievable. Even had tools. Every student would get this kit of tools for $500, worth about $500 in those days. And they would use that during the training, and then they can keep it upon successful completion of the program. It's a 2-year program. I said, wow, this is wonderful. Everything was great. And then the Rotarians unloading the things. Then we had the students start putting the desks together and setting up the shop. And then the Rotarians would come by often, and they would start explaining to me how it worked, and through the magic of Rotary finance. And they raised the Canadian Rotarians raised $60,000. And then the district matched it another $60,000. So now they have $120,000. Then, since it was an international project between 2 clubs, Rotary International doubled that. So now they had $240,000, and that's what paid for all this equipment. For their $60,000 fundraiser, they got $240,000 through the magic of Rotary finance. So everything was good. That's when when we set up, then they invited me to my first Rotary meeting, and they sing God Bless the Queen, always the best restaurant in town. And I couldn't afford the restaurant. Peace Corps volunteers aren't really fully volunteers. We did get paid. And in those days, we got paid approximately $300 a month, which was okay. Well, that was maybe a little more than the average teacher that my coworkers were getting. Not much more, but almost equivalent. So a lunch there was just beyond me. And dues, I couldn't even afford dues. And I was only 20. I couldn't even be just barely be a Rotaractor. So I did. So the program worked out great. I had to do 2 programs: a day program with the young kids, and then an evening program for the older adults. And they all became my friends. Especially the older adults. If it was a full moon, that's party night, and same thing. They never put a full moon to waste. And they would take me to the beach, and they'd have music, and they would cook a chicken and things, and really became part of the culture, really blended into, I became Vincentian. I was young enough to absorb the culture and become part of them. And even to this day, I've been told I make the best curry goat on my block. And beef jerky. So we had a wonderful time. The program was a great success. I extended an extra 6 months to keep up with the school year so we could finish the program. So it was almost 3 years I was there. And then USAID also joined in, because some of the equipment had to go back to what they were going to do in another country, in Dominica, with the Rotary International Project. And everything was good. Then I completed my service. And there was other projects too with the Rotary. But one thing I noticed though about between the Peace Corps and Rotary though is it's based on volunteerism. Peace Corps volunteers and Rotarians want to
Tom?
Looks like we lost Tom for a moment. Wait until he comes back, Malika.
Yes, I just want to add at this point that in the 60 years since its creation, more than 240,000 Americans like Tom, like Charlie, have served in the Peace Corps. Actually, chances are that you might have a Peace Corps volunteer next to in your neighborhood.
Malika is back, by the way. Sorry.
Okay.
Tom, can you hear us now? You have to unmute yourself, Tom. You're muted, Tom.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So everything went well, and but there was about Peace Corps and Rotary is about volunteerism and cross-cultural
Right.
practice and getting used. And that's what we feel brings about peace, I think. And we had a great time, and we were very productive with Peace Corps, and I'm a real supporter. Then when I was leaving St. Vincent, I knew I wanted to be a Rotarian. I used to go to a lot of Rotary meetings, and a lot of Rotarians in St. Vincent became my friends. And even a lot of Canadian Rotarians would come down in groups of 3 or 4 and see how the program was going. They would want to meet the students and see how that money was being spent. And they were all very proud of it. And it was a very good partnership between Peace Corps and Rotary. We also did other projects where the Rotary was always involved. They would ask us to put a generator into this little medical clinic way up north. And St. Vincent is the country where that volcano exploded maybe 6 months ago. Many of you read about, and that's where St. Vincent. They had a volcano eruption there just about 1 year before I arrived, and it was still suffering. That was a much worse eruption. So when I got back, my plan was, after I completed my service, was to start my own company in New York. And but I said, when I get back, I want to become a full Rotarian, not just a guest of Rotarians. And then I said, I have to get my company going first. And I bought a house, and I had to get that settled out. And but then within, I'm going to get some business cards and pamphlets and flyers printed up so I could get my company going. And then I go into some willy-nilly Mr. Printer, and there's that little Rotary banner hanging on his wall. And I said, "Oh, you're a Rotarian?" And I told him my story that, from last month, or I've been doing the last 3 years. He said, "Oh, that's great. That's terrific. And where's your office?" I said, "It's right down the block." "Well, come by tomorrow. Our meeting's tomorrow. I'll take you to lunch and meet the fellows." It was all men in those days. And then I hit it off right away. I became a full Rotarian. I became president maybe 5 or 6 years later. And I was stayed with that club for 20 years, and I was the Rotary Club of New York for 20 years. And we did one other thing that worked too with Rotary is around before I was president, we had a 25-year anniversary of the Peace Corps in Washington, D.C. And I met one of the directors there for the Peace Corps. And what I found we could do is the Peace Corps always needs, they're doing some type of adventure, like maybe need sewing machines so they could teach sewing to people, modern sewing techniques to the women in the village, or they need a deep fryer to make a plantain factory. And so Rotary will put out a listing and mail it to return Peace Corps volunteers. If you'd like to donate to the volunteer, he needs $800 to buy the sewing machine. And put it out, and hopefully it would say, Mary Smith from Boca Raton, Florida, needs $800. So I had then this directory. This is the directory of Rotary clubs around the world, and you can go through this, and then I would look up, does Boca Raton have a Rotary club? And there's the president. I call up his telephone number is in the book. And I would tell him the story that there's a resident from Boca Raton that needs $800. She's in the Peace Corps. He said, "Sure, we'll give her $800, no problem." So that worked out pretty good. And then I gave the Peace Corps the directory, and supposedly they did a lot of work with it. Our club did like 20 of them, and they were always 100% successful. And I imagine that's what they're doing now more. But this is before computers and email and everything. But that worked out good. So Rotary and Peace Corps can be very good, where Rotary, Peace Corps can provide the teachers and the volunteerism, and the local Rotary Club can provide the finances to the Peace Corps volunteer. So that's why I think their relationship is very strong that way. So, and I have one thing. I have one picture from there. There's a picture of the Technical College, and the director of the Peace Corps, of the World Peace Corps, her name is Lorette Ruby. And this is me there in the middle. My wife says I haven't changed a bit. What do you think? Maybe 10 pounds? Can you see that? Yeah, okay. That's Lorette Ruby. She was the chairperson. She was appointed by Ronald Reagan. She passed away early though. Okay, so now I'm going to pass you off to Charlie Miller, the other Peace Corps volunteer and Rotarian in the room. It's all yours, Charlie.
It's good to point out that the Peace Corps Volunteers organization is a bipartisan organization. In these times where everything is partisan, I think it's good to point out that very important detail.
Yeah.
So Charlie, you have the floor. Very compelling experience indeed, Tom.
Thank you, Marika, and thank you, Tom. Nisam Bulabinaka, Kemani Turanga, Kemani Marama, Kemani Lewini Vanua Ko Rotary Club of New York. I am honored to be part of the legendary Rotary Club of New York today. When I was in college, I did go to the UN and went to the chapel, I think it was called. I'm not sure that that's the right term, but I think that's where you've often held these UN meetings in the past. And that was probably in 1966 or 1967. So I was there, and I'm glad to join you again. I had a little bit different Peace Corps experience than Tom did. It was 3 months of training, and it included language training because the Fijians spoke Fijian for the most part in the villages, and also 50% of the population of Fiji is Indian. The British imported indentured servants, we might say slaves, but they were indentured servants from India, brought them to work the sugarcane fields in Fiji back in the 1800s, and they've done very well at multiplying. And now the Fijians are about 40% of the population, the Indians about 50% of the population, and the other 10% is a wide variety of Chinese and Australian and British and American. And probably many of you have had Fiji water. That's now the chief cash crop of Fiji. And without Fiji water, I'm not sure that Fiji would still be able to exist. And I was a school teacher for 2 years, teaching 7th and 8th grade in a village school. Had about 25 kids in each one of those grades, and taught along with a Fijian, the headmaster of the school. It was a fascinating experience. We had no electricity. The running water was a water tap next door, and lived in a bamboo, I had a wood floor with a bamboo walls and thatched bamboo roof. So it was a wonderful 2 years and a way to change your life. And my Rotary experience started when I was a youngster. In 1955, I went to the Rotary International Convention in Chicago. That was the 50th anniversary of the creation of Rotary by Paul Harris. And they had that in Chicago, and then 50 years later, they had another one in Chicago for the 100th anniversary. But I went to that one in 55, and in 1956, I went to the Rotary International Convention in Dallas, because my dad was a Rotarian at that point in Alamogordo, New Mexico, which is where I was born in Texas. I was able to overcome that by moving to New Mexico when I was 10 years old. And then life has been living the dream since then. To tell you a little bit about the Rotary Peace Corps partnership and how it got started, back in 2009, in my club, we had 3 or 4 former Peace Corps volunteers, RPCVs, Returned Peace Corps volunteers, that were attracted to Rotary because of its international focus, its emphasis on peace, and trying to do projects around the world with boots on the ground, helping and that service above self. So we thought there ought to be a natural partnership. So we started meeting, and that was in the fall of 2009. The first meeting, there were, I think, 7 former Peace Corps volunteers, the district governor, a former district governor, and we met at Sue Fox's house. Sue Fox was, she had been president of our club about 3 years earlier, and she had been a Peace Corps volunteer about the same time I was in Fiji. She was in Liberia in West Africa. And then we also had some volunteers from other clubs in the Denver area. One had been a volunteer in Korea. And when we met, we said, we have to get Peace Corps and Rotary together. It should be a natural partnership, just like Tom found by having a Rotary Club in Canada funding his Peace Corps activities in St. Vincent. We had also had some projects where we had helped Peace Corps volunteers do a water well project or other activities such as that with my club. And we also had 2 projects that involved Fiji, one of which was about a $300,000 water purification project, and then along with that came a sanitation project. But we also found out that Rotary is a huge bureaucracy to get things changed, to get things added. And the Peace Corps was probably even a bigger bureaucracy in order to have any kind of to create any kind of partnership. So we had about 10 people at that first meeting, and the grand plan was to connect Rotary and Peace Corps volunteers on the ground. And that would combine the youthful enthusiasm with Rotary resources and Rotary connections to help out, whether we thought, okay, electricians, plumbers, doctors, lawyers. Rotary has all kinds of professional resources that can be of immense benefit to some 22-year-old, 23-year-old, or even a 60-year-old Peace Corps volunteer that's out in the field. And we found out almost immediately that wasn't the first, we weren't the first club to have the idea. That in fact, the Rotary Club of Washington, DC had a couple of Peace Corps muckety mucks that were part of the Rotary Club of DC, and they had looked into the partnership a year earlier and exchanged letters and said, gee, this would be a good idea. But from that meeting, we started meeting once a month. And the next step was getting a district-wide Rotary Peace Corps committee started. And we found out that there were about 20 to 25 returned Peace Corps volunteers as members of various clubs in the district. And so from that, we started looking for projects to prove that this was a good or could be a good partnership. And it took then 5 years to get to the point of being recognized after we had the district committee to be recognized as something that could go Rotary International. There was some pushback from Rotary that this was an American Peace Corps, was the US obviously, but other countries had similar volunteer, government-sponsored volunteer sending out, such as Denmark and Britain and Australia, that they were sending out volunteers doing similar work. So we tried to glom on to that and create an interest group that Rotary would recognize, because it would involve more than one country. And that took, though, that 5 or 6 years to come to any kind of fruition, but it finally did get recognized in 2014, and that ended up in a memorandum of understanding that was signed in 2015 by John Huco as the relatively new General Secretary for Rotary. Ron Burton was the international president at that point, and Carrie Radelet was the acting director of the Peace Corps, and she was very supportive of the idea and had attended one of our district conferences and spoken at it, and we were then able to convince her that it was a worthwhile partnership. And when that got approved, we got access to Peace Corps volunteers, in the sense that Peace Corps is very protective of their volunteers. They don't want the volunteers to be inundated with information. They want the volunteers to be part of the local culture, doing their work in villages and cities and in the field. But Peace Corps also recognized that by having a connection to Rotary, that those volunteers could get access to refrigeration specialists like Tom, and electricians and plumbers and social workers, doctors, and even terrible lawyers that aren't always seen in the best light around the world, but can do some very good work if they can get those people connected. And in addition, the financial resources that Rotary can bring. While I was in Fiji, the Alamogordo Rotary Club and also the church that my parents attended got together about 250 books, sent them to the school in Fiji, and that's the only library that school has had. So those sorts of things make an automatic partnership between Rotary and Peace Corps. But in addition, by having the returned volunteers and getting access to the mailing lists, the names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, Rotary now can find return volunteers, and they make wonderful Rotarians. It's not just Tom and me. We now have about 50 return volunteers who are, that we know of anyway, who are active in District 5450 and clubs in Vail and Summit County as well as throughout the Denver metro area, have former volunteers, returned Peace Corps volunteers, and they do. We make wonderful Rotarians. So I would encourage your club to try to make a connection to whatever RPCV organization is there in the New York City area, and I'm sure there is one, to make sure that return volunteers are aware of Rotary. Because it's, the power of Rotary is that we're still changing lives and we're still changing the world. And so is Peace Corps. So I'm open to any questions or whatever that anybody might want to raise.
Very good, Charlie. Very good. I learned a lot from that little talk there. Very good.
I did learn a lot myself. I never knew that the Peace Corps volunteers has been emulated by other countries. I didn't know that the Scandinavian and Australian
Canada
have volunteers in the field. So I'm discovering that. And also the 50 returned volunteers who work in not only in Rotary, who work in Rotary, but also in all walks of lives. I want to point out that one of our most successful executive director of UNICEF was Carol Bellamy, and she was a Peace Corps volunteer herself, and she was director of the Peace Corps when she was recruited to head UNICEF, which is, in my view, one of the most important UN agencies. So they are everywhere in all walks of life, and very efficient. The experience of living 2 years abroad has shaped up their character, and your presentation is very compelling, very, very interesting. I open the floor to any questions.
Malika, if I may ask, Charlie, thank you very much. Great presentation. And you brought up an important point. Tom, are you in contact with former Peace Corps volunteers in
Oh,
New
yes.
York?
I am. There used to be, up to 5 years ago, there was a greater New York area of Peace Corps volunteers. I have reached out to them in years past, President Gerard. I haven't really heard from them in more than 5 years. They still may be in existence, but there is a group. The problem with that is Rotary is you need to be able to have a job that you can pay dues and also have a 2-hour lunch. A lot of jobs you can't have a 2-hour lunch, and so they're not in the profession that they can do that. Yeah, if you're a lawyer or a business owner, you can make time, but a lot of people just can't be Rotarians. They can do the Zoom maybe, but that's part of the issue with that.
That's the big problem we have in New York, because we all know, as New Yorkers, the city loves to
That's right.
Chew you up and spit you out. And,
that's right. And I also
a 2-hour lunch, really?
I haven't met another Peace Corps volunteer Rotarian in our district, I don't think.
So Tom, maybe we should look at the possibility of having an evening event.
Yes, but with Charlie, I think with Charlie though, Charlie lives in Denver, Colorado. And if I was a returned Peace Corps volunteer and I wasn't a New Yorker, because New York is a kind of provincial, we always want to stay in New York. But if I had the choice to live and I've returned from the Peace Corps, I would, especially in those days, I would have moved to Denver, or Boulder or something. I wouldn't move to New York. Since I was a native born New Yorker,
Okay, let me also point out that there are e-clubs now that are very inexpensive for membership. And that has been one of the places where returned Peace Corps volunteers have been part of the e-club that at least District 5450 has. And they're only, the dues are like $100 a year, I think, and they only have one face-to-face meeting a year, and the rest are done online. And that is something that the returned volunteers now, I think, would be able.
Tom, this is something I think we should explore.
Okay, no, I will, Gerard. I'll get back into that group. It's a Facebook group, and we'll see what's going on there. And I'll definitely maybe I'll invite him to a seminar or something. We can have a meeting. You know, especially now with Zoom, there's no cost involved. You know,
Or if we also have the possibility, assuming we make progress with COVID, we have the possibility of an in-person evening event.
Yes. I will. You motivated me, President Gerard, and I'll do my best to reach out to the Greater New York Rotarians. Peace Corps returned Peace Corps volunteers, and I even Malika, you picked that up. We're trained too that we always call ourselves returned Peace Corps volunteers. We never leave the Peace Corps, but now our job is to talk about our Peace Corps service and to discuss the issues of the countries we served in. So we always go with, we never call ourselves a former Peace Corps volunteer. It's always returned Peace Corps volunteer. Almost like the Marines, you're always a Marine once you leave the Marines.
Exactly. That's right.
Well, we've also had several in the district that I'm aware of, older people who at time of retirement, they were Rotarians, then they went, one went to Uganda, one to Honduras, one to Nicaragua that I know of in this district. So
yes,
yeah, we're not just young volunteers anymore.
That's right. In fact, even then, Charlie, President Jimmy Carter's mother went to India.
Yeah, that's right.
At the age of 68, I think. She was 68 years old when she went, and she served 2 years in India.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. I have also met an older person when I was serving with UNICEF in Ivory Coast, in Côte d'Ivoire.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
they are all ages, but mostly, of course, they are very young people, sometimes not even out of college. Sometimes, I don't know, they do recruit them after high school, right?
Peace Corps?
I think
Yes.
they have to be 21 anyway. I'm not sure
Yeah.
beyond that.
It'd be very rare unless you're really an experienced electrician or something that you never went to college. I mean, I think you have to be 21 also. I don't, you have to have some skill. So
Yeah.
you have to have
I'm not sure I could qualify now for the Peace Corps. In 1968, they were happy to have what they call BA generalists, bags. And the schools of Fiji were happy to have us because we had a college degree, and virtually none of the teachers in Fiji at that point had any college. And we also had part of the program was to teach teachers. We had volunteers who were at the Fiji Education Institute teaching locals how to be teachers, and also at the University of the South Pacific, filling professor spots at that institution.
Sure. Now, Charlie, it seems a lot of Eastern Europe, right, the former Soviet Union countries, a lot of Peace Corps volunteers work in a very urban area, much different than it was 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Well,
Tom, Charlie, if I can pose this, I'm hearing again discussion of having a requirement for national service for our young people. Obviously, we don't have the draft anymore. Do you think that Peace Corps could serve as a model for young Americans for volunteer service in the United States?
I will say absolutely. We still have AmeriCorps, which is the I guess the stateside equivalent, and trying to get those recent college grads in areas of need within the U.S. I hope that we'll be able to get Peace Corps reinvigorated and able to go to back out into the field. That Peace Corps has never had more than, I think, 8,000 volunteers in the field at any one time. And the last number was about 7,500. Could it be expanded? Certainly. Are there ways to expand service with it, the Civilian Conservation Corps model from back in FDR days. There are lots of areas where we need help, I think, across the country. And I don't know how much of this infrastructure bill will have funds for that kind of activity, but I know that we have some projects going in Colorado in the National Forest, trying to take younger folks to get them helping in fire prevention and other things that it's probably good just to be outdoors, but who are doing some worthwhile projects to help in rural and poorer areas of our state.
Yeah.
I was thinking specifically, Charlie, I mean, all of that damage that was done in the entire Northwest, in Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Arizona, that would be, a great area for volunteerism. But also we're trying to start something here in New York in our club of mentoring students in the local public school system.
President Gerard, if I may interject here, a personal experience that I had with the Peace Corps volunteers in Ivory Coast while I was heading the office for UNICEF in Abidjan. And if a picture is worth 1,000 words, so this is a project that UNICEF and the Peace Corps volunteer, you can see the two logos up there on this T-shirt, and the bicycle, it's a project that has to do with a bikeathon going from west of Côte d'Ivoire to the east, stopping in 25 villages and mobilizing the villagers, the population, inciting them to send their children to school, not only boys, but also girls. It was a very successful project. It was very easy to work with the Peace Corps, and their volunteers were just wonderful, so full of energy. They were very efficient. The launch was very successful, covered by the press, by the national press. The ambassador of the United States and the minister, well, the secretary of social affairs, a lady, opened the bikeathon. They were on their bicycles, of course, after all the speeches, and you know that in Africa, they love to talk, but then they mounted their bikes. There were 20 bicycles. They wrote to Hillary Clinton, at the time, First Lady, to send those bicycles, 10 for the local young people and 10 for the Peace Corps volunteers. And they went from village to village. It was a very, very successful experience and a very good project. It got very high marks. So maybe it's time now to sign a memorandum of understanding between UNICEF and the Peace Corps volunteers. In any case, we meet them everywhere when we go in the field as UNICEF program officers on our project, or to supervise our projects. And
Malika, how about UNICEF and Rotary? Some type of understanding agreement.
Rotary, but we do have one already, the eradication of polio.
Okay.
As you know, Rotary gave the money and we implemented the polio eradication in the field. But as good recipient of donations, we prefer to put a Rotary in front and give them all the credit. But Rotary did have plays a big role in the eradication of polio. The Rotary, UNICEF buys the vaccine with Rotary money. We have a warehouse in Copenhagen where all the vaccine is bought from, and we convinced as UNICEF, well, as I am retired now, but we convinced manufacturers of polio vaccine to continue producing polio vaccine because polio had not been eradicated from the face of the earth. The manufacturers think that because polio has been eradicated in the industrialized countries that can't pay for the vaccine, they could just slow down the production of vaccine. We convinced them that there was money, and they continued producing good quality vaccines because in parallel, India was producing its own vaccines, but polio vaccine, but it was not recognized by WHO. So UNICEF buys the vaccine and also uses its own cold chain in the field to carry this vaccine. And they also use the health centers, UNICEF supported health centers to distribute this vaccine. So now I have made my pitch for UNICEF. The money came from Rotary International, of course, and all of us as members as Rotarians. Now that's a digression about how Rotary and UNICEF work. We do work together, definitely. And this example is of course, we signed an agreement, and I am very proud to say that I was present when our executive director, Jim Grant, signed the agreement in Evanston, Illinois, and I was left to do the follow-up until I left headquarters for posting in the field. So, but coming back to that picture and that project, I think it's a glaring example of how the volunteers are helpful and amenable to they're very flexible, full of wonder, and very efficient. They are very convincing. The coverage, the population brought their children to school. That first day of school was very successful, and there was an increase of 80% in registration of children to go to school. A smashing success. It was not the only project that did it. The social mobilization effort went on for a year. Distribution of leaflets and talks with villagers, etc. So that was my contribution to as a witness of what the volunteers can do in the field. Have I lost you?
No,
Both here.
No.
Yep.
no, we're both here.
Okay. So, sorry for the pitch for UNICEF. Of course, Rotary is more important now.
Mhm.
And thank you for the funding pitch for that sewing machine. Is it still on? Has it been? Have they found the funds for it?
Oh, the sewing machine? Malika, no, that was years ago. I was just using
Oh, okay.
it as an example. I did have one question for Charlie. Charlie, in your presentation, you talked a little bit about a $300,000 water program that your club did for Fiji Islands, was it?
Well, it was a Rotary project.
Oh, yes.
But yes, it was a water project in Fiji.
And was that funded but through the magic of Rotary Finance? Where you guys
Absolutely.
raised yes,
Yep.
you know, it's amazing, right? It's amazing how you can make the money grow with Rotary. And so,
Yeah.
so we always say I was saying here is, Rotary allows ordinary people to do extraordinary things, whereas a club can raise $300,000. Was there a lot of interaction back and forth? Did Rotarians go visit the project from Denver?
There was some. There were, well, one of my club members was a former district governor, actually was on the International Board of Directors. He owned property in Fiji. And so went down and did check on the project. And we had a Rotarian from Alaska who also lived in Fiji and was our boots on the ground for the water project. And she's still active in Rotary in Alaska. So, but yeah, it was one of those typical Rotary things that you have one person very much engaged and they're able to convince 5 or 6 Rotary clubs that this is a worthwhile project. And that 5 or 6 each contribute, 1,000 or 3,000 or whatever, and then district matches and Rotary International matches, and pretty soon you're up to $300,000
Right,
for a significant contribution for a major
changes
project.
the world.
Yes.
Right.
Charlie, I've been in Colorado a few times, not recently, unfortunately, but the last time, which was a while back, I spent about a month there. And the one thing that impressed me was the friendliness of just about everyone I'd met in Colorado. And I did some traveling. I didn't stay just in the Denver area. I probably put about 700 miles on the car. And there was I noticed a real distinction between the people in Colorado and the surrounding states, that the Coloradans, to me, were extremely friendly and outgoing. Do you think that is a reason why Rotary's been successful in Denver?
I'm sure that's part of it. Yes, that if you're not friendly and welcoming, it's, well, I don't think I've ever been to any Rotary event that wasn't friendly and welcoming. Whether it's and I haven't been to a Rotary meeting in New York City, but I certainly have been to Rotary meetings in lots of other places in the US and around the world, and Rotarians are always welcoming. And I hope that, or I'm glad to know that it's not just Rotarians that you found friendly in Colorado. But I think there is a more openness to that, to other folks in the West generally. And I guess that's why I came back West after 3 years in Boston at law school. But it's still, I very much enjoy coming to New York, but I don't think I'd want to live there. It's a wonderful place to visit.
Charlie, I have one question about Colorado too that I've been reading about, and that I haven't been able to talk to a Coloradoan about it. But it's a place where marijuana is legal now. All right, has it changed? Has it changed the state at all, or anything noticeable? Was it a good thing, a bad thing, or no effect?
What is most noticeable is the marijuana grow operations. They are very odoriferous. They call them the skunk works, and that's because you can be driving down the street and all of a sudden there's this wafting smell of, it's kind of like skunk, and it is the marijuana grow when they are ready to harvest. Is it a net plus or a net minus? We do have a lot of programs that are now funded by taxes on marijuana that I think can have some long-term positive effects.
Yeah, so let's let's encourage more smoking and then you get more taxes.
Well, yeah, but now the gummies and CBD oil, and there's all sorts of smoking of marijuana is still not something you occasionally smell that, and I would say that I don't think it's a negative at this point. But we haven't seen much reduction in crime. We haven't seen, I mean, I don't think there's anywhere in the country that we've had much of a reduction in crime over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And they thought that it might reduce domestic violence and other things like that, that I don't think there's a whole lot of support, that there's any statistics that back that up. But I don't think it's been as big a negative as law enforcement feared, and I think the general political fear of marijuana isn't justified from my point of view. I think it's been certainly no worse than alcohol. We haven't, I mean, we still have drunk drivers. We now are trying to figure out how do you determine whether someone is high enough on marijuana that they should not be driving.
Yeah.
But I don't think that we've seen a significant increase in crime or anything that's a result of marijuana. And there hasn't been increased usage by teenagers. That was I think the biggest fear going in.
Yeah.
That it would just that would mushroom the size of teenagers getting access to marijuana, and that the increases, there has been no significant increase in marijuana use in teenagers that they've been able to find any statistics for anyway. So I don't think I would, and if it gets considered on a ballot measure or something like that in New York City, I don't think it's something to be feared.
Okay, good. So I actually had a discussion with former Governor Cuomo's office about this issue. I'm a former prosecutor. The statistics that have been coming out of California and Washington, places like that, are very interesting, but it's a topic for another day.
I'm sure that you can find people on both sides of the argument.
Oh, no,
I'm
absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we have, you can imagine, in New York City, you put 2 people on the corner and you have 3 political parties. So yes, absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Wilfred Wilkinson, past Rotary International president, Mary Shackleton, Doug Vincent, past district governors. Mary, haven't spoken to you for a while, and a number of our guests. And of course, this is recorded so that a number of our sister clubs will be able to see it later on during the day or during the week. So Malika, back to you. I think we've reached the end of the hour.
Thank you. It was really an honor to discuss this very specific subject of Peace Corps volunteers. We are very proud. We're very happy that that the relationship between Rotary and the Peace Corps Volunteers organization has been formalized, and it's truly a great idea to deploy these young people to learn and to also be useful. Well, I thank our speakers. I thank Charlie Miller, who woke up very early this morning. And I thank Tom. I thank all the audience. And of course, many told me, many members told many Rotarians told me that they can see the video anyway, so they don't have to be present. It's a plus and a minus because they cannot ask questions. But in any case, thank you very much for everyone to have made this this breakfast very interesting. So I welcome John German,